Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope you're well. This is your Sensei El Bob coming to you on your Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei El Bob YouTube channel. And I've been trying to, hello AI, I've been trying to make a show for you guys, but the connections haven't been there. I was just watching a whole bunch of things. And one was the 12 Monkeys, and the other one was Fight Club, and the other one was Apocalypse Z. They all have Brad Pitt. That was very interesting. And there was another movie I saw called Doom with The Rock. And pretty much all of those movies are about the human folly of ego. And I think that's kind of what we're experiencing right now. This little, NCV-19. Whether it's, manufactured or just sprang out of nature, it's a response. There was a book and a movie written called The Last Wave. And when I went to Australia, I didn't know about it. And there's another book called A Mutant Message from Down Under. And when I went to Australia with my first wife, Dawn, and we were like flying on Pan Am Flight 007, right, from LA to Sydney, and we stopped in Hawaii, and then we stopped in Perth, and then we went to Sydney. And it was the longest freaking airplane ride I've ever been on, and we were in steerage, in the way back of the airplane, squished up with a zillion other people. And it was, really disgusting. And, because, the toilets in airplanes are basically just porta johns. And so it was really terrible. and it was in a 707. It wasn't a 747. It was a terrible airplane. Anyway, so I was in the John right when we went from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and I pushed the button, and the blue water was going down clockwise, and then it slowed down and went the other way. This is 1977. And I had an epiphany, meaning first of all, I pinched a loaf, and I got up and I pushed the button, and I kind of went into a state because normally you just push the button and the thing goes, but I kept my finger on it, so it just kept doing this. So if I just pushed the button and it did this, I wouldn't have seen the water slow down and then go the other way. And when I did that, I saw a tremendous wave because I was watching the blue water. It was swishing around like a wave, and I saw this wave, and it basically took out all of Australia. And I was um, above it, and I had been in a fire dancing with Aborigines folk. And I really didn't even know about Aborigines. I saw some pictures in the National Geographic sweatshirt. And I just was not. I was going to go there for a few weeks with my sweetie, and we were going to go visit a friend of ours, and that's all this was. You know, I did not expect to be there for 3 years, and I did not expect to have my consciousness raised. I thought I was the dude. I already had my consciousness raised. I was already the dude. But I had, comeuppance by my experience with Mother Nature and Father Sky. And it was brought to me through these people I lived with, the Walamajiri, which were a tribe in the Northern Territory. And the closest thing I had to experience with these guys was with the old crone, Madame Olga Kluver, and my two, my one Hopi elder teacher, Grandfather David. And they were quite astounding. And my sensei, my Japanese Shinto priest sensei that I lived with for a little less than a year in Putney, Vermont, when I helped him make a ashram there, a healing temple. And he taught me how to heal and how to see and how to read and how to live. And so I've had all these great experiences, many of them. And most people would have been blessed if they had one, but I've had my whole life has been, one extraordinary experience. And I've been surrounded by, wealth and fame and extraordinary individuals in my life as teachers and mentors and friends. And I have stayed under the radar the whole time. There were many times I told you a story about one of my twin flames, Stephanie, right? And if you go to, I don't know if it's the last one, but maybe the second to last. And if you go, because I was just kind of meandering like I often do with some morning ramble. And I didn't get into a story until I was already an hour into the live chat. And, a couple of people came on and, hey, how you doing? You okay? Blah, 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 which is nice. I'm glad people concerned about me. But, what I'm looking for within the cadre is real communion, about how you're doing. Not so much how I know how I'm doing. I know how I'm doing. How are you doing? You know, and I kind of express my how I'm doing. I tell you how I'm doing. And I'm an old guy who's died a few times, and And, my body is, challenged, but because I have the relationship of love's co-creation, I'm like the Timex watch, keeps, takes a licking, but keeps on ticking. And I'll be here as long as God needs me to be here. Because I serve. I'm here to serve at the behest of love's co-creation. That's what I'm here for, right? I mean, there have been many a time that I could have, made a fortune, been famous, all the above, but I'm here to serve. And whatever fortune I may make, or whatever fame I may acquire, would simply be a vehicle or a tool to serve love's co-creation. Now, for the last 50 years, I have studied and learned and served my teachers to serve love's co-creation, to assist all my relations to awake, right? Not to be woke, but to awake, to ascend, to be conscious of my soul's free will and to ascend it, right? And that's, even though I've died 6 times, that's why, they were almost, you just kind of died. Not really all dead, And as an EMT, first responder, in Ithaca, New York, for 2.5 years, I saw a lot of people do that, go and come back, you know. And the firehouse I was in, we were a really extraordinary team, you know, and it was mostly women. There were about 28, 30 people in our house. It was a volunteer house, and 4 of the women, the chief, lieutenant, and the other 2 EMTs were women who were professionals, meaning they were in, um, you know, Ithaca's, you know, professional city fire department. And they, were some of the best uh, people in that fire department, but because they were women, they didn't, they were kind of notched up to their skill set, but they didn't become a captain. They didn't become a lieutenant. They were all EMTs. They were all really good at their job, but they were not. So they were given the opportunity by the state to take over this volunteer fire department outside of the city in another town called Barna that had a firehouse, had a fire truck, didn't have a captain or a lieutenant or EMTs, and it was just really not. It didn't respond, and it was in a place that really needed to respond because our house was right where 2 interstates intersected, and instead of building a clover leaf, they just had the highways, cross over. So big trucks going this way would run over little cars going this way. So we would respond to 5 or 6 mammoth car crashes a week. And because there was nobody there, a lot of people were dying. So the state said, okay, the firehouse is there, the truck is there, the equipment's there. We need people there. So they said to the city of Ithaca, give us 4 people who can be the core of a thing. And so these 4 women said, "Oh, hey, we'll do that. Hey, we'll get paid a little more." And the woman who should have been a captain in the fire department became a captain in Varna. The lady who should have been a lieutenant, second in command, she got that job. And the other 2 women, they were EMTs, but they weren't first responders. They wouldn't let them be it because all the guys were the first responders. And so they got to be first responders. And then they built the fire department. So majority of the fire department was um, women. So the 28, was 25 or so women, and the rest were guys. I was one of them, and 2 of them were all, the majority of the guys were guys who were running the volunteer fire department, but they were all farts and they couldn't do anything. They had no real training, and so the captain came, and they were like happy to see these girls show up, and then they got other women to do it, and it was a really great house. We were a family, and these girls were in their 30s, so they weren't, they were up for a good time. None of them were married. Um, Most of them were bisexual, and our captain, our lieutenant, and our two first responders were great teachers because that's what they did in the ethical department. They taught everybody. They couldn't go up, so they got made extra money by teaching, and so you know, it was an extraordinary experience um, to have. And so I lived across the street, and I didn't realize it was a fire department because there was a state trooper barracks there in this concrete building, and the doors were facing sideways, so I could never see unless I went up there what was going on there. But I kept seeing these pretty girls going there. So one day I walked up there across the highway and went up there and said, "Hey, girls, what's up? What are you doing here?" And said, "Oh, this is a volunteer fire department." And anyway, long story short, I joined, and because I live across the street, and the cab said, "You live across the street? Oh, that'll be great. You can. We're going to send you off to, you know, EMT school, and they'll teach you how to drive a fire truck, and you can drive in the pumper, right? Because we had a pumper and a bus. Bus was the ambulance, and the pumper was the. It was like an amazing thing. Not only did it have 5,000 gallons of water that you could, put on something, and 5,000 gallons, that's a lot of water. And it had a foam machine, you could turn that water into foam. And it had every kind of hydraulic tool you could imagine, and lights like you couldn't believe. You could light stuff up amazing. And when you come up to a car crash and it's crushed and the truck's on top of it and people are inside, and you got to cut it up with torches and hydraulic tools, with jaws of life and the snippers and all the other tools. And we had these airbags that we could press. We it was like that thin. You'd slip it in and you put air in it, and it would open things up. Right, more than the jaws of life have these pincers. You can get a purchase opening, right? But these bags could open up and lift cars off of things, and these women were trained like you couldn't believe. They were like military, right? And so, I went up to school. I'm always willing. If someone's going to pay me to go to school, I'll go to school. So I learned how to drive the truck and how to run the hydraulics and how to run the pumper. And there was a guy called the engineer, an old guy, and he knew that truck. He fixed it. He was a mechanic, so he would um, get there and he would run, and I would drive it there. Sometimes he would get the response, and he was pretty quick, and he lived up the hill, and he would get there, and he didn't have too good eyesight, but he knew that truck backwards and forwards. So we were a great team, and so we would get there, and the others of the squad would show up in their cars, and we'd go to work. And so I was trained as an EMT, and I could put in lines. I could do airways. I could do. I could sew people up. I could. We had these pneumatic pants that could hold you together. Um, we could give certain drugs, and we were telephonically connected to the hospital, and the hospital was an extraordinarily high level trauma care, right? And that was what they mostly did: trauma care, and they had a clinic on the other side, but they had a big ER, and they had an operating room, but for trauma, right? You know, burns, crushes, punctures, you name it. That house, that ER could deal with it. It wasn't a real hospital, it wasn't a big hospital, but it was a number one trauma center, right? had a helipad so they could fly people in, or I could fly them to even larger facilities. Anyway, so I did that for 2.5 years, and I saw a lot of trauma. It was like being in war, right? Because we would respond to 2 to 5 of these horrific crashes a week. And it kind of stuck me there in a way that because I was a integral part of this team, we all were. And so it kind of, you know, kept me from doing other things. And I'm a guy who doesn't like to get stuck. If I have one issue, it's getting stuck. And my issue of not getting stuck is so much so that that's like me getting stuck. That's kind of what it is. So, and I had a real sixth sense about things, meaning when I'd get the call, I'd be asleep and I had a radio and we'd come over and the call would come over and you would hear dispatcher give it, but my radio was also kind of like a pager. This is before cell phones. And so it would, give the codes and what it was, and then it would print it out on my little screen. And I could, go through like where it was and it would feed, that information when I would get to the fire department in my truck. There was, a larger screen that it was basically a computer and it connected to the hospital and they could talk to me and they could follow where the truck was. So they knew where that truck was and they could, on this screen, give you instructions of how to show up at a certain place. But if the old guy got there, which he 90% of the time got there, and we would leave together, he knew he knew the 3 counties like you couldn't, he knew everything. So he was better than a GPS. So, and the captain, she slept there, so she would be on board. And lieutenants sometimes, they were kind of sweet on each other. So she had her little apartment in that firehouse. And but the firehouse was like a party central because our adrenaline would be pumping by this, and then we would come back to the house, and our adrenaline would be moving so hard that we couldn't go back to sleep. So we'd make a big meal, and then we'd dance and have a really good time. And that was like one of the it's like friends with benefits, and that's one reason they were my family. So that was another reason why I stuck at that, because at a certain point I said I can't do this anymore. It's like burning me out. I'm not like you ladies. You live for this. This is just an experience for me, and I love you guys, and yeah, it's been great, but I can't do this anymore. And anyway, I'm moving on. I got another gig, and so and I went on to another Grandfather Day. I got involved with the Iroquois Nation in their negotiations with the state when they were getting the land back. So, and then I did a rainbow gathering in Trumansburg, which is right next to Ithaca. And I got involved with Ithaca Bucks, meaning Ithaca succeeded, left the Union and and ran the whole scene themselves. So I mean, so I had, I couldn't. My whole life wasn't just that. Plus, I was working for a big electric company, and I was doing large industrial. I rewired a Cargill Mineral had a salt mine on the northern part of the 3 counties where I think it's Seneca Lake. And that salt seam went from there in New York State all the way to Ohio. And over 100 years, they had dug it all out. And it left this chasmous cave of what was a salt seam, and they turned it into a deep underground military base, but it was a corporate military base, right? And the company I work for, my specialty being high voltage and transmission, we brought in the transmission lines into that area, put a substation there, and then brought the power down as a primary uh, power. They had gigantic gas turbines, and I had done that work in Mexico, same thing, for a uranium mine. And that's why when I bumped into the guy who owned it, Gus Bear, was Bear Electric. And Gus Bear was a guy who, his father was like, Mike Stoll in New York, one of the first electricians in the country in the 1890s. And he worked on he knew, Mike Stoll. So when I told Gus that I work for Mike Stoll, he goes, Grandpa, like I said, my life is like that. There are all these synchronistic connections. So even AI left. Well, back again. So, what's it say here? Well, you guys should be able to send me some texts, you know. Anyway, so all of these experiences, right, have given me the talents and experience to, be a survivor, be a negotiator, to be present, to be conscious of my consciousness's free will soul, and that my real purpose here is to ascend, right? And that's why I keep, staying here, because my service is my tool for ascension. Yet, I'm here out in the deep green, and again, I'm staying at my um, neighbor's house, and he's overcome his you know heart thing, his operation, and he's okay. But he just watches TV and he bowls, and he goes out. So he is out, meaning I don't go out. I don't have the money to go out. So, um, you know, here we are, and you know, NCV-19 is ravishing the world now. One reason I kind of stay here is blow up bed, which is relatively comfortable, a little more comfy than sleeping on the piece of foam I have on the ground. And it's still not summer yet. It's getting to be spring. It was a beautiful day today. Um, and it's raining a lot. So it's nice to be in a house and there's a shower but you know, it's like a throw the dice with this guy. I mean, where I am, I don't get near anybody because there is nobody. My neighbor is my only person I see. Yet, um, he goes out amongst the things, right? So last week I went out to do a live chat from the lake, right? Because I wasn't in. When it rains, it's really cloudy. The internet here is off the satellite dish, and it's an issue. So I go to restaurants where it's a hardwire, and I can get on and talk to you guys. So I went to this place, and there was a guy there who is a server, right? And I go in the place, and this was a week ago, right? And and I've been watching, the whole world, what's going on. So most people around here, until the TV starts telling them what's going on, they have no idea. So I knew Italy and Iran and South Korea and Japan were having a really hard time, right? And I was watching how we were dealing with it and what was going on and what were the issues, and then I would go read um, you know, web pages that were for doctors and first responder type people, and I was seeing what they were saying, and then I was looking at what FEMA was saying and what CDC was saying, what NSI was saying, and SNSA and NSS, and all the alphabets, right? And what I was seeing was that, I mean, our military, when Donald Trump says, we're not we're not Amazon. Well, actually, our military is Amazon, better Amazon than Amazon. They can get anything, anywhere, anytime in like that, right? And all that Donnie would have to say is, start setting up, mass hospitals in all the big cities and, start, looking at what we need to do, right? And I was looking on these web pages where these people in the military and FEMA and all that, and they were like, we're ready. Why doesn't he give us the word? We're ready to respond. And they're still not responding, you know? He hasn't, like, now he's signed all the executive orders, right? To basically get rid of the Constitution, to bring on martial law, to, have, uh, you know, uh, COG, you know, continuity of government, the so if you go watch, you know, dark journalism, the last 10 shows he's done have been extraordinary about, what it is, what's going on. And it looks like because China was draconian. They can be, right? So, there's centralized government that runs everything. That's, they are, um, you know, we are a capitalist state. They are state capitalism, right? So they put all the resources. I mean, they built hospitals in days and they did everything you had to do. Meaning they closed everything down, kept everyone in the house. If you got sick, they were testing everybody. And if they took you away and put you, in quarantine and found out everyone you had talked to, and they have everyone in this social observation. Everyone in China basically lives in a fishbowl, and because we have a credit score, they have a social score, and so everyone's their money is over their cell phone. Everything's off their cell phone. And so they know where everyone is and who's everyone's talking to, and everyone's being observed. And now we have it in our, there's a woman who wrote a book called Surveillance Economy. And that's what we have. Our cell phones are these surveillance devices. That's why they were given to us. And yet they're not doing any of this. And it looks like New York, LA, Louisiana are going to be, whoa, right? Probably if they keep, being as incompetent as they are, I say the worst case scenario, 10 million people get infected in the next 2 or 3 months, maybe a million die. Now, the thing about this virus, it spreads like, forget about it, right? I've never seen a virus spread like this. But 80% of people don't really get sick, right? Now, the people who have compromised systems, people who are old, they die, right? Not all of them, but they're the ones who are dying, right? So it definitely looks like this thing was engineered to spread amazingly, um, basically not get everyone really sick. But basically, I think this virus was designed to get everyone on the planet sick, and that everyone will depend on the government or the New World Order or whatever you want to call it, as Catherine Austin Fisk calls it, Mr. Global. And, if you're a good team player, if you're a good doobie, then you'll get your $1,000. Now everyone's supposed to get $1,200 in America, right? And by April 6th. I haven't really checked up on this, but it looks like all the old people aren't going to get anything. And the people who need it the most, like me, I live on $500. I could truly use $1,200. I have the end of the last week before I get my check, I usually have $20 left, right? So I don't go anywhere. But I spend all my money because my HMO who used to take care of me has been bought out by a large corporation, and they basically this HMO was set up for poor people, but it's a very good system and it's a national system, and so a large insurance company bought them because they're nonprofit. They're a certain type of nonprofit, so they can dump $600 billion and not have to pay taxes for it. And the system is very good. So now the only people who can use it are rich people who have that insurance company's insurance. So if you have Medicaid, Medicare, or poor, they got rid of you. And so the best thing about these guys, I had a sliding scale. So I was like super duper poor, so I didn't really pay anything. And it had everything, dental, eye, you name it, it had it. And this I got a little note saying, "Oh, sorry, you have been canceled." Right. So I have the emergency room, and I live in a place that the emergency room where I am is like a Band-Aid stand. Where they have two you know nurse practitioners who are 23. Who when I go visit them, I have to tell them what to do. So it's like, oh, so there's Lana. Let's see. Yep, here I am. Hold up. Lana, could you please type this stuff in capitals because I can barely read it. Let's see. How I woke up exactly when you. Okay, well, I might get a little alarm clock. It's 5:11 early. I would get a PM. Anyway, so how is it going in your neck of the woods? Has it gotten into the zombie apocalypse yet? So, have you checked out Dark Journalism? That's a really good channel, and there's another really good one that I follow called uh, what's it called? Truth Media. And then these other guys from Denmark, and the guy's got this little black goatee, and it's like Star Trek, and I watched it last night, and they had these guys from different parts of Europe, and it was like a Saturday Night Live skit, but they're real people, and they're really doing pretty interesting things and have really interesting experiences. Yeah. So when I'm in the deep woods, in my own little part of it, I have no access to it. But because I'm staying at my neighbor's house, he's got Wi-Fi, so I get to look at it all. And he has a satellite dish for TV, so I see TV all over the world. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere, but I have access, to it, and I just spend no more than 2 hours at that, right? And I spend most of my time over in my little spot cleaning it up, getting it ready to live in. But like today, I kind of got my tarps in tune. They were all kind of all blown up by the winter. I kind of let them flap because if you have them tight and the snow hits it and it freezes, that's really heavy, and then tears them up. If you just let them kind of blow in the breeze, they could be tied back up. So anyway, that's what I did today. Yeah, a few other little things. I'm starting to go through all my stuff. And last year, the raccoons, I wasn't here. I didn't get here until May. And so the raccoons showed up and tore the place up. And it took me the whole summer to just clean up what the raccoons did. And because I'm there now, the raccoons, they can make a little mess, but, you know, they had, 2 whole months. It's like they were discoing down. I actually got one of my disco balls and rolled it all the way down the other end of my property. So, I mean, these guys are just, off the hook. Let's see. Well, that person, people who are, we live in a sociopathic world. The people who run it are sociopaths, psychotic sociopaths, and not to say that within the structure of the government there aren't good people. There are. There are a lot. I was one of those guys. I worked for folks like Brookings and other foundations and other entities, but we live in a corporate state, you know, and entities like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergs. These are all corporate entities that interface through the UN and NGOs to run the world, right? And they're psychopaths, right? Now, they're very polite and they're nice and they got all the money in the world. So they don't really get, they have wars. They wipe people out with smart bombs. They don't jump up and down and scream because you use their towel the wrong way, they don't care. So that person, he just had the experience of, because she was going to be mad at somebody when she showed up, and so I just happened to be the person he got mad at. And she only, I went away, to my deep green for 2 days while she jumped up and down and screamed and yelled at the sky, and I wasn't there. I was there for the first 2 hours to see, when she came and screamed and yelled and jumped up and down. And, I waited to see if she could calm down and we could talk because, I trained to deal with folk like that, right? I worked in hospitals and I can get anyone to calm down, but she didn't want to calm down. So she wouldn't talk to me. She just screamed and yelled down in the basement. And I waited patiently upstairs and she never came. So I left. And the next day, I thought she might calm down a little bit, and that's the little video that I got of her. And I was being nice. I didn't show her. I just got her voice, and she was far enough that you could just barely hear it. But it caught the the motif. So I'm not going to let that. I did my best. So what can I do? And the thing I did learn was that so I shouldn't have even thought I should have like slept on the floor or the couch or something and not on the bed, just me sleeping on her bed, she went off, that I ruined it, that I slept on her bed, right? So, but there's so much more important things than that, so that's not even something that I'm thinking about, I processed it and I learned something, and one of the things, and it's kind of what's one of the main issues. So everything that's been going on for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks since NCV-19 has become, worldwide and on the media is that it represents the fact, 1,000 years from now, when they go, well, what's the cause of the end of that empire at that time? And what it will come down to, they'll say something, but what it will be is that we, you know, in this time and space, as Homo sapiens sapiens, in this globalized Mr. Global world, we have been addicted to convenience and belief in opinion, right? Just like the Roman Empire was based on bread and circus, this is based on fast food and flat screen TVs. Same thing. And the Roman Empire collapsed on the same thing of convenience and belief and opinion. They thought they were, God's gift, and we're not. We are no more important as a species empire than, worms. And worms are more important than we are because they actually, bring a great deal of life to the planet. So, things like that are just, yep. What do you need right now? Some money. If you could go to my PayPal at the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail and just drop anything. Like I have basically $5 and I have to go plead with my banks not to close my account because my credit is so bad that I'll never be able to open up another, you know, banking account. And then my checks, I won't be able to take my Social Security is direct deposit, but if that bank closes my account, which it could for any reason, that would be it for me, at least money wise. But the more things get tighter for me, the more things get more interestingly wonderful, right? So, um, so I have one of the counties, you know, I've been here 20 years and I've gotten involved in a lot of different things. So a lot of people know me and a lot of people in, the powers that shouldn't be know me. And, um, will take me out to lunch when they have an issue. Like, we need to figure out how do we do this, Al. And so, the judges, the lawyers, the mayor, the chief of police, the guy who runs the school, the hospital, the guy who runs the national, what do you call it, National Guard, you know, all those folks, the guy who runs, yeah, the state university in Tennessee. These people know me, and again, you know, they know I can't. I don't often answer the phone because I can't get it, but they'll message me, or send me again. Everybody wants to get a hold of me. The real way is the dude awake at 42 Gmail. The dude awake 42 at Gmail. The dude awake at 42. No, the dude awake 42 at Gmail. And that's where my PayPal is too. Anyway, uh, and I don't leave here because, to get to any of those people, it's 40 miles one way. And that's 80 miles round trip, and that's about $3 worth of gas, or 3 to 5, or whatever expense it is. Anyway, so, and if my bank account gets closed and my electric goes off, and I could live without electricity. I mean, it's I would be get close to nature. So and I have a smart meter, so everything that has a wire or plugged in or current running through it, I'm being affected by the Hertzian wave. And our bodies, we aren't a an electrochemical device. Our bodies are more prone to electrical frequencies, radio, microwave, all of that, and that's why, our cell phones, and that's why, the little bit of research they did in the 1940s about this technology, they said, there could be, effects on this, but they hadn't discovered DNA yet, they hadn't, and pretty much, that kind of technology was developed but not produced. It didn't really hit the scene until the 90s. And I mean, they had, cell phones. They had, it's called wireless phones, right? And they had those, but they didn't have towers everywhere. And so anyway, um, it doesn't matter about me. It's not about me. It's about all my relations, you know. And I spent a good 50 years trying to wake people up. Now, you know, I was entertained. I had a good time doing it. I didn't wear it on my sleeve like, oh, wait, oh, I didn't go through town, you know, oh, the end is coming. No, I'm saying let's have a good time. Let's have a life that we can share amongst ourselves. Don't do PayPal. Well, let's do that. Well, you could always get a hold of me again, and I can send you my mailing address, and you can send me a check or something. I can send. I have meds. Actually, what's interesting? I haven't had any meds for about 3 weeks, and I went and saw my good doctor here, and my diet, I've been very, because I don't have money to really buy food, so I've been, not eating any processed food, just kind of eating vegetables and proteins and canned vegetables. And my blood sugar has actually been in pretty good shape. I've been eating a little cinnamon and coumarin and tamarind, and it's been in pretty good. And my eyes, about 3 weeks ago, I went and saw my eye doctor. I don't know next time because he was part of that HMO thing, but he's a little separated. They just referenced me to him, so he's trying to figure out how to pay for me. Um, and my doctor, my good doctor in this neck of the woods, he's trying to. He said, "Well, I'll try and figure out how to get you your meds." So anyway, but um, I really see what's going down, and because you know, so in America we've had 50,000, tested people with NCV-19, and about 600, 700,000, somewhere in there, have died. Right. Well, in that same period, the last 2 months, um, 2 million people have been infected by this season's flu, and 19,000 have died, right? And lots of different people, not just old folks, but the whole gamut, from little kids to old folks. So, you know, this really looks, if so, like I said, if you go, um, you know, dark journalism is a good singular place to go look. It's on YouTube, and he interviews really good people. He is very good at. He doesn't. A lot of these shows spout their opinion as a belief. This is true. I believe this. You can be healed by this by, rubbing banana peels on your nose. No, uh, cash is king. Yep. Yeah, I'll contact you with my address on the Gmail. Did you get my two kind of semi spiritual messages I left you, Lana? Man, thanks for your advice. Of course I use cloves. I use everything. I'm an herbalist. I make my own little potions. So, Lana, do you know about thieves? Thieves is like tea tree, cloves, and a few other things that the guys who were the Khazarian mob during the plague, and they were the gangster along the Silk Trade. And so they would rob people, and everybody was dying in the plague. So they made this substance called thieves, and you can get it at pretty. If you have a good herbal store near you, you should have it, and it's very good. They put a few drops into a cup, put hot water in it, with a few. It's very good. I use that and a few other things. So anyway, where we are right now is at one of those crossroads in time. This is very similar to 9/11, because 9/11, after 9/11, things were never again like they were before 9/11. And after this, because this virus, what it's going to do, it's going to affect everyone on Earth, right? And so everyone's going to have to stay in their closet, and then they'll, level off the, like, China, was so draconian about this. They've got it down to about, 3 or 4 people a day. Right now we've got thousands getting infected. But the problem with this thing, and in South Korea, it was there was this their patient 31, and she got infected, and she didn't get sick at all, but she spread it around, and she was part of this church in South Korea that they have these mega churches, and she went to 5 or 6 of them in a matter of days, and this one person infected 500,000 people, because not only did she infect people who come to this church who come from all around the world to be to this church, and they went to other parts. One of the reasons why it got spread around the planet was this one person called Patient 31 in South Korea. And the problem is that, and they're seeing this in China, is that people got infected and got well, and got over it, and didn't tested negative for it, and so they were let go, and they went back to work, and they were doing fine. And China was smart enough to say, okay, you got to come back in a few days and get tested. Kept testing people, and people started to have the virus come back in them. They wouldn't get sick, but they would be able to pass it on to other people. So what you're going to see is this thing of a spike, right? And then the draconian measures will bring it down, and then it'll do this, and then it'll spike again, and then it'll come down. It's going to do this for the next 3 years. So the whole world in the next 3 years is going to have to be, right? And it will kill, uh, whatever percentage it is. I think it's somewhere between 3 and 8% of the cohort that gets sick dies. And it's people with compromised systems, and most of those are old. So this is basically going to wipe out people like me, you know, and other people who are as old as me, people like my neighbor, who had open heart surgery, people like all my all my lawyer friends, because every single one of my lawyer friends has had a bypass because they live this totally decadent life of rich food and smoke cigarettes and drink too much. And what's really interesting is, I'm a demographer, right? So I look at every kind of trend. And since the First World War, well, since the Civil War, we've been keeping really good statistics on mortality because insurance came around and those guys developed the science of looking at mortality. And so, because they're betting on you staying alive, So, you know, we have better nutrition, better food. People stop smoking and drinking. It's been going down like this, right? And then the rest of the world kind of followed our path. Now, the rest of the world is living longer, not America. Around 9/11, we started doing this, dying more, especially white men, right? White men between 30 and 70 commit suicide, either by eating a gun, smoking cigarettes, drinking booze, and obesity. And it's a suicidal life. And I was on that, when I worked I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, but I sure ate. And I wasn't going to eat a gun. I was having a good time, but I didn't die. I was in that cohort, but I didn't die, right? Because my job here wasn't done. Hey, research, how you doing, buddy? Big crowd. Yep. Well, it's quality over quantity. How have you been? Haven't heard from you in a while. Uh, well, it's as some friend of mine once told me, I'm an acquired taste, you know. And in reality, I do these shows more or less as a historical reference, because man, I got over 1,000 shows on my channel, right? And they're all pretty interesting, and the people who like them get a lot out of them, and so I do it for them. And a friend of mine in Scotland told me that it was pretty obvious that the powers that shouldn't be were like stepping on my algorithms, and that's fine. And because I had a show a couple of weeks ago where 500 people watched it, right? And I was going, I had a stream of something going on, and as I was talking about it, it it basically said, and all I was doing is telling a story, said that I was, infringing on somebody's copyright. And I wasn't playing music. I wasn't in a restaurant. I wasn't. I was like this. I was like in bed telling a story, and um, they clicked it off. And then the black screen comes on, and it says, how many people watched for how long, etc. So this, that show lasted about 3 hours, and 500 people watched it, and they watched it for virtually the whole show, like 3 hours. So 500 times 3 hours was like 1,500 hours. Um, you know, into it, right? And and I was just an hour or two from being at a point where the algorithm would have kicked me into the stratosphere. And I think that's why I got cut off. They didn't want me to hit that spot. And so, I saw that and I said, wow, that's pretty interesting. So I, closed the lid and went to sleep. And the next morning, I went on my channel to see if that show even was put up there. And it was, but it said it was watched by 12 people. So it's it's up there for prosperity or not prosperity for old lang syne. Uh, so research, what have you been up to? Still living in your mom's basement? Anyway, and I can't, if you want me to read what you're saying, you got to put it in all caps because my eyes aren't good enough to. My Dollar Tree glasses aren't working. Uh, well, you got to watch out for those dreams. You know. There's a girl. Uh, she's Ashley is her last name, and she is truly an angel. And she's kind of like Grace, truly graceful. You ever watch that? Truly graceful, dark journalism. Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan, uh, media. Hmm. It's this boyfriend girlfriend team, and they did um, they do these really great videos, and they did one called "The Mind of Man." Showing how we're all being, we're just lab rats in a box, and they really, they really do their homework. They really, you know, and then they produce the show. Me, I just do like I'm lying in bed here. I'm doing a stream of consciousness, and but those guys have really, and also Crow House, Max Igon in Australia. That guy he's right on. Um, and there's another guy. He's a computer programmer who had worked for DARPA, and he did models. So in the 70s, he did a lot of modeling of what would happen with nuclear war and chemical war and what's his name? Uh, I don't have my notebook in front of me, but anyway, I put it up on other shows. I put up all their stuff on other shows. Um, and what he put up that was really interesting was he put up the 1978 handbook on chemical warfare, on the whole soup to nuts. How to about strategy more than the chemicals, but the strategy, right? And it was just like what's going on with this thing. So, and Max Rogan of Crow House. So, research. You ever see Crow House? I really like that guy because he's definitely thinks outside the box, and he is, not speaking from his opinion. I mean, he is, but he's not saying it is fact. Like me, I always say, "Hey, don't believe a word I say." You know, I'm just your griot telling you a story. And uh, researchers names you. Anyway, uh, yeah, you is really an amazing guy. A really great cinematographer. Really great scholar, interviewer. His channel is really great. I guess he doesn't have a capital key because I can't read his stuff because it's too small. Uh, mm, So anyway, these are times of great opportunity because we're going to be tested, you know, because, basically unemployment now is at about 19%, right? Which is kind of where it's always been. And they're dumping all the money that's left of the Fed is just printing money. And when you do that, that's what happened with the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 1920s. They just kept printing money, which brought down the value of the Deutschmark. And this is going to bring down, and once the dollar, so now a barrel of oil is almost $5. Can you believe that? I mean, back in October it was $70, right? 2 years ago it was almost $200. Now not so much. And that is a sign of what industrial output is, meaning they're not using any oil, they're not driving trucks, they're not running factories, and that's why oil is so cheap. And so you get a thing called deflation and stagflation, and that's what eats a hole out of your economy. So this is all kind of being let to be done because um, after the '08 debacle, you know, and the guys who did that were you know what's the name of that bank? Goldman Sachs, yes, Goldman Sachs. And so it's really interesting how Carrot Boy said, "Oh, I'm going to go after the deep state," right? Well, the Goldman Sachs, right? So, you know, Goldman Sachs had been in, the West Wing for a long time, since Bill Clinton was the first. And that's why he went to the center, right? And got rid of the safety net and put everybody in jail and got rid of all the banking, like the Glass-Steagall Act, and allowed, Goldman Sachs to just fleece the country. And then once they, drove it off a cliff, um, you know, first W and then Obama did TARP, and then they did a thing called, you know, quantitative easing, where they just printed money, gave it to the banks gave it to corporations, and corporations just bought the stock. So the stock market went through the roof. Well, once this, little situation happened and people weren't working, the equities started going through the floor, right? Now, the things that the Congress are doing are giving free money to the corporations who are just going to buy the stock back. And we can't do that a second time around. And why they didn't just because the TARP Act went through Congress like a snap of the fingers, like hours. Well, they've been hemming and hawing about this for the last week because they, they want to give the guy who is our Treasury Secretary basically $750 billion that he can spend any way he wants without having to tell the Congress or anybody else where the money's going, right? And having just like TARP, they had no responsibility. Nobody went to jail. Nobody paid it back. So it's an interesting little thing that's going on, and this gives the individual the opportunity um, to really look at themselves. To be reflective. Look at yourself. I love that song by uh, Michael Jackson, "The Man in the Mirror." You know, and we need to look in that mirror every day, right? And that's kind of what I do here. I'm looking right at me. There I am. I'm looking at me. You know. Again, don't believe a word I say. You know, this is about you. You know, I just tell you stories, and what a griot does, it just weaves a tale, and the tale distracts you from the monkey in your mind that then allows you to be self-reflective, right? So that's what I do. I'm here to try and serve um, those to be self-reflective. So, Lana, I'm ready to listen. Talk. You know, tell me what you want me to hear, and I'll respond. You know, I just keep going. Let's see. Uh, Ian, issues don't want to come to Europe. Well, ISIS, you have to realize ISIS is a brand. It's like Kleenex, you know. When we went into, all the wars that are going on right now are just about making money. It's about causing chaos to ferment a new normal, right? So Mr. Global can usurp rather than just manipulate. Because, since, oh, Mesopotamia, Mr. Global has been here, right? And I think goes by many names, you know, High Table, Hidden Hand, Illuminati, Powers That Should Be, Sock Puppets, Usual Suspects. But these are just poster boys. The real deal is things that, you know, good and evil, and a lot of interesting people have done some great art to represent these questions. Like film is the art of the 20th century and 21st century, the modern times, and films like H.G. Wells' Things to Come, you know, Orwell's Brave New World, Huxley's Doors to Perception. These are books first, but then turned into films. And The Matrix. That's a very good movie. It really does kind of give a frame to look at our lives outside the box, that the box we're in, right? And that's why meditation and prayer are kind of important. Uh, yeah, the eagle and the lion, right? And the bear, right? Those animal totems of empires. And they're all the same, right? They are Piscean animals of power, not understanding. And the snake is also one of those animal totems. And for the last 25,000 years, that's kind of what humanity's been doing, you know, um, pursuing the experience of being, this avatar through violent means, you know, rather than through, service to love's co creation. And that's where, what the Aquarian age is. the next 25,000 years. And that's kind of what, the end of my calendar was that hard break, right? That nail in time. When the Ice Age was over and the Pisces, the Aquarian Age was starting. Anyway, so Lana, what do you say here? The eagle, the storm. Yeah, I've been having dreams the last few months about storms. I kept, for the last 18 months, I've been going on about, hey, there's a window of opportunities coming our way. And this is it. This is the window of opportunity. It's what we do with it that counts, You got to get, there's that, great reggae song, get up, stand for yourself. I mean, it's kind of what we have to do. Now, we don't have to do it, what is that? Strange. And, I don't like to use the word stupid, but sometimes that fits. But people who go on about the carbon footprint and, what is that thing out of Scotland? The extinction, blah, blah, blah. I mean, things like that, you're just getting played. What you really have to do, if you have to have that personal connection with yourself and the higher power. And then, as you go through life, you let that higher power be your guide, not your ego, not your fear. Yep, I just hear, not listen. Yeah, active listening. Nobody listens that way. Now you're missing a lot, If you're not listening, you're missing a lot, And I was very blessed as a little peanut of a child. When I got beat up by that nun, broke my jaw and broke my orbit of my eye, so I couldn't see very well. And I couldn't talk very well. So I didn't talk. I listened. So I became a real active listener. And I had a stutter. And it wasn't until I met Madame Olga Kluver, who basically, sat me down in she had this great little healing chair. It was like a dental chair. She had a big bright light. And she also had these, when you go to the eye doctor, the old things with the lenses, so you could look in your eye. She had that. And she basically said, you see things in a different way. You're looking at things in different frequencies. You see electromagnetically and not optically. So, and she said, and you hear, when you orbit, not only did it hurt your thing, but it did a thing to your hearing. So you're listening to people's vibrations. So she made me aware of this, and we would train where I would truly listen and be conscious of what I was hearing and think about it actively And then I could speak without stuttering. And I practiced that, and I became better and better as a speaker because I was listening. So I could, you know, I listened to what people said. And so when I would respond to what they said, I would be connected to them emotionally through the electromagnetics of it, right? That's why later I can communicate well to you, and I'm not even hearing you, I'm connecting to you through the internet. Let's see. Land of the Eagle, yeah. And the thing about Albania, you were a great tribe, and you were a great nation that had its day, and it got nailed to time. And when you go culturally back to that time, you see the greatness of it. And that greatness of that time has an echo all the way, you know, into the present, right? It's still there. And that's why you are the way you are. You're not even there, but you are still Albanian. 13 is quite the interesting number because 13 is the number of the illusion mystery. A good example is the Hebrew nation, right? They are, the Hebrew nation is made up of the 12 Hebrew tribes, Ananashki, Lubavitcher, Hasidim, and all, right? And the guys who were the Khazarian nation, uh, well, they weren't a nation, they were a mob, were forced to become part of that by the Russian Tsar. They said, stop, we're all criminals, but they were like the ISIS of their time. And if you go Google Khazarian mob, it'll show up. What is this?
Something went wrong. Try again in a few seconds.
Anyway, when I start talking about certain subjects, the internet interrupts me like that. But anyway, so so the 13, that Khazarian mob, they tried to hook up with the Hebrew nation, but they were just pretending, and they are the folks who are the Zionists, or the Nazis were looking for the Aryans, and that's the Khazarian mob. So um, there's a real difference between the Hebrew nation, the 12 tribes, and if you read the Torah, God told his chosen people, the Hebrew nation, the Hebrew tribe, not to have land. Why do you think Moses was out in the desert for 40 years? I mean, he was right, Jerusalem was right there. He just kept walking around it, never went there, kept killing people, warring, doing this, doing that. But, so 13 is this interesting number of the not only mysterious, but there's a better, somewhere between the word illusion and mystery, there should be another word rather than lie. so so that's 13, right? And if you study Kabbalah, 13 is very instrumental. That's where you get into alchemy through Kabbalah. because they were scared of you. That's why the Nazis were, they were into magic. But see, magic is kind of fake because it's either light or dark, but it's never connected. It's this radical element, and so that's when that's what physics is. Especially quantum physics is kind of a mix between alchemy and magic, and that's because real alchemists, turning base metals into gold. What is the base metal? We are the base metal. This, you know, avatar, this bag of water. And the gold is that thread that leads us up to love's co-creation, ascending our consciousness. Well, all three, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are basically the same religion, Muslims are Christians on steroids, Their book is basically, the, Muhammad, the great prophet, said, Islam is based on the two religions of the book, and the book, there was only really one book, and that's the Talmud, the Old Testament. The New Testament is more like a comic book. And the Quran is a very interesting book because it's a cultural representation of the people trying to understand, this ancient book and this comic book. And they put it into a frame of their culture, which is totally, relative to them and viable. And Islam is based not on wrath or, it's based on hospitality, right? Sharia law is based on the Old Testament. And, so if I'm really hungry and I got kids and they're hungry and I steal a loaf of bread from the baker and he runs after me and gets me, takes me to court, the guy says, okay, well, the guy who stole a loaf of bread, he gets his hand cut off, right? But you, Mr. Baker, you get both of your hands cut off because you should have given him the loaf of bread. And so for the baker not to get his hand cut off, he will then say, okay, and he will give that guy that loaf of bread and continue to give him that loaf of bread as long as he needs it, right? And that's how society works, right? Now, our society is based on profit, right? And labor, right? Capital and labor, look at Marx. And your culture isn't based on that. Let's see. Right. That's why I don't like using the word God. That's why I'm constantly talking about, love's co-creation, because that's right here, right? That's when you feel empathy for the other and you create, you know. That's when, you love someone, you have children, you're co-creating through love. So when you have children and you lead by example, you're co-creating through love. We have to realize that religions are a business plan. usually based on some good ideas, or usually a good, you know, you know, proto character, like Jesus, or a Hebrew nation, because there's 12 tribes. They had 12 good characters, lots of them, and a lot of them, most of them were women. Let's see, the Korean is younger than our three called Korean is older than all of them. Yep. And each of these religions, the best, as a religion, it's just a business plan. But as faith that an individual has in their heart, that's a different story. I mean, I lived in the Middle East, in Egypt, and well, when I say lived, I was there for about 4 months. And I lived there, I was living, and my gig was I worked for a university that was on a dig. There was a site uh, in the Valley of Kings, and they were digging up technologies. I mean, that's why we went into Iran in '91, because the Germans and the French were digging stuff up in the deserts there that were basically things like, very advanced technologies of ancients. And they were sharing. So we sent our first army into there to, pick that shit up. And that's why we went back in '03, because we picked up those toys, but we couldn't figure them out. We had to go into Baghdad and steal all the keys out of the library there, out of the museums there. So anyway, I was there in the Valley of Kings, and I got to, I didn't go out there in the dig and dig shit up. I stayed in town and, hung out at the coffee bars. And when my boss would come in every other day or so, they had rented a nice house that I was staying in, so put me up in a nice hotel so I could eat in a restaurant and go swimming in a pool. So I was living a good life. And I would go back to this house where they had a very nice library, and they had people working on the stuff that they were digging up to try to catalog, and I would look at things when they would come in, and I would take pictures and document and measure, and then go off and think about it and write little you know processes of what I thought they were. And then I would, go into their nice library that, had really good computers and connected to every database, and access to every, database that the average person can't get in, and we'd do a little deeper digging that way. And then the boss would come in and I would show him my stuff, and he would think about it, and then he would go away and maybe dig some more and come back with more toys, and he would just state on what I had thought about, and that's how that was my job, and I really didn't interact with the scholastics and the guys who were digging and dusting and going on about shit. I was thinking, outside that box. But I had a lot of time on my hands, and I hung out in town with all the people, like I said, all the coffee bars and restaurants. And I got to, I would go to prayers. And now mom came to me once and said, "So who are you? What are you doing here? You're not part of my flock." I told him my story. He goes, so are you Muslim? I said, well, I'm Muslim, I'm Christian, I'm Jewish, I'm Buddhist, I'm Shinto. And he said, oh, okay, you're one of those guys. And I said, yep. And he goes, well, good. You can come and have lunch with me and have tea, and we can talk about theology. I said, sounds great to me. And so I did that, and I got to be part of that group of people, and I got to know them, and they all invited me to their house to eat with them. And I was trying to learn Farsi and their culture and ask them questions, and mostly listened to them. I didn't tell them anything, right? And the kids would want to talk about movies, stars, and well, I don't really look at that. I talk about movies that I like, but I wasn't really the kind of culture they were, seeing on MTV. But anyway, so I spent 3 months, working for these guys. But I spent only a third of my time. The other 2/3 of my time were hanging out with these folks, you know, and they accepted me because I was humble and I was sweet and nice and interested in who they were. I listened to their stories. I didn't tell them anything unless they asked a question, you know? So that's kind of how it rolls. Let's see what you're saying to that. Let's see. Uh, the Greek word education, which I guess is an extension of learning, is to understand through experience. That's the Greek tense of education. Uh, Pyramids are everywhere. They're in the United States, they're in South America, they're Russia and Ireland and England, and they're everywhere. Because they are machines and they are connected to the planetary grid, and they're everywhere. And was my mentor in Ireland, Archie, at Trinity. He was one of the first people who were writing about pyramids being stargates. He was writing about that in the 1920s, and he was a rich Scottish. He came from, his father was a duke or earl or whatever, baron, and they had a gigantic chunk of Scotland. And he went to Oxford, and he went to both Oxford and the other one, and he ended up in Trinity. He liked that better. Anyway, I spent a good 3 months with him going up the West Coast looking for pyramids. And I did that in the early 70s before ground penetrating radar, and this guy could douse. And he was also very connected to the Gypsies and Roma, and he could speak their tongue, which was a very interesting tongue because it was made up of so many other tongues. And the Gypsies were very interesting people. They were very honorable, and at the same time would steal your eye teeth if, like the first time we met a gypsy group going up the West Coast, we pulled into, we were on we didn't have a vehicle. We had a horse-drawn kind of RV, a gypsy wagon, and this, the tourists, the adventurous tourists would take these things, and they would stop at ferry circles. That's where the good grass was growing, and so that's the horse would just plod along. You couldn't make him go any faster or slower than it wanted to go, and you could stop it and tie it to a tree way to do something, but otherwise it would just plod along. Anyway, we pulled into this one gypsy circle, and the gypsies were there, and uh, and so Archie and I got tied our little horse stopped, started eating the grass. We tied it to a bush. We got out, and we went over and said, "Hey, how you guys doing?" And they said, "Oh, well, what are you guys?" And Archie said, "Well, hey, I'm Archie. This is my friend, my student Al, and we are students of the bards. We were the druids. We were looking for pyramids and magic circles and prayer wheels and hedgerows and and we're about to have dinner. You guys, we got some stuff. It's some wine and some nice bread and cheese and we're going to cook up this chicken with some vegetables and potatoes, and we'd love to share it with you. Why don't you come, bring over some chairs?" And so those guys came over with their instruments, and they brought over a bunch of food, sausages, and other yummy things. And we all made a nice fire and cooked up a great meal and sang and danced and drank and drank and drank and drank and smoked and smoked and smoked. Had a lot of good smoke. And Archie liked to smoke. And we had a really good time. We spent 2 days there and listening to their stories, right? And of tales of giants and many other things. And so we went our separate ways, and we, plodded with our little horse-drawn carriage a few miles up the road and pulled off in another gypsy circle. And there were some other gypsies, and the guys that we stayed with got a hold of those guys. They all had CB radios, and they were waiting for us, and we were their friends, and they were really nice. But if we had looked down on them or treated them patronizingly or been anything other than ourselves and, the guys we were, they would have taken advantage of us, and they would have been duly right to do it. Yep, from Scots and Ireland, yeah. Let's see. Did you know that pyramid is in the Balkans? Yep. Yep. Uh, so, Lana, Estonia, how far from your land is Estonia? Did you ever hang out in Estonia? Because Estonia is one of the countries that has gone totally 5G. I mean, everyone has and they no driver. Everything's an E. Everything's digital. Everything is, they have no money. Do you know anything about Estonia? Okay. So, what story you want to tell me? My throat is getting a little dry here. Yeah, there's something very strange about Estonia. I've never been myself, but I've been looking at what they're doing, and it's like they're giving up their humanity. They're being played with. Whenever you go down that transhumanist dead end. You're always getting played with. And that's what this ACB 19 is. It's a dead end. Oh, hold on a second. I have to get a vitamin C here. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, I've been to Estonia, and well, Lana, you know who the other one is? The other one is AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, as soon as I hit the, go live button, within 5 to 30 seconds, that one is there. What don't you like about Estonians? I've only met a few, and they were all what were known as technocrats. The only Estonians I ever met were at the United Nations. Now, when I lived in the Lower East Side, it was full of Lithuanians, Polish, who else? All of that. And really great borscht, Russians, uh, goulash, schnitzel, really interesting foods. Kind of heavy, but still pretty yummy. So, what's your favorite grandma dish? You know, we are best known, all of us. You know, I look at people, psychosocial, culturally, and the culture is like, where'd grandma come from, and what did grandma make for holidays? So, what did your grandma make for holidays? You seem to be awake, but not. Well, yeah, it's like 1:30, and I'm in bed, and the internet allowed me to put this show up. And like I said to the Yui guy, I do these shows for the folks who show up, like you, and I also, what's interesting is like, so when I end the stream, it shows statistically who watched, how many, how long, all of that, right? What's very interesting, There are people who watch who don't go on the chat. There's usually 20 or so folk who watch who don't go on the chat. So right now it says two. So it's you and the artificial intelligence, that is the internet, watching me. And no, it never talks, right? Never. I invite it to talk because for the first 15 to 20 minutes, it's the only thing watching, right? Like I said, between 7 and 30 seconds, bingo, it's there, right? Never comments. Lies or, lying, cheating, stealing. I learned very young, about 6 years old, because I lived in Harlem and I had a crew, a bunch of guys I hung out with. Because Harlem was, in the 50s, was a place that was very safe for kids. It really was. It was very interesting. Because there were no cops. It was run by grandmas, right? And they had like jungle drums, It's like, it wasn't all black people. The east side of Harlem was every nationality you could think of, Italian, not only, Jews, but every kind of Jew from all over the world, every kind of Italian from all over the world, every kind of German, Lithuanian, Polish, Jamaican, every kind of black person, you name it, and Hispanic folk, on the west side near Needle Park was Hispanic folk, Spanish on, and they were Caribbean, and so it was the most delightful cultural place. But anyway, I had this crew that about 8 kids, and they were all those things, not, a couple black guys, a couple Hispanic guys, a bunch of white guys. We were all about six, between four and we'd run around, play stickball, go swimming in the East River. And the Con Ed plant was there, and they had bunker oil. I remember jumping into the Harlem River, and the oil was so thick when I got up, I looked black as coal. And my black friends laughed, oh, look at you, you're a black guy, And we, and I remember one time somebody calling me a nigger. And so, wait a minute, you can't call me that. Look, I'm white. And this grandma who was sitting on the stoop said, no, Al, you don't understand. That word doesn't mean color, it means attitude. And at that moment, you were acting very much that. And she explained to me that most people who were the N word were lawyers, judges, priests, rich people. Let's see. Anyway, so I remember hanging out with my buddies, and some would lie, some would cheat, some would steal. And I was very quiet, and I was always observing. And we all went to this Catholic school, and till I got beat up, and then I was lucky to spend a year with Marino priests who, were the greatest, kindest, smartest people I've had, other than my grandma, the privilege to hang with. And anyway, because I didn't speak much and I listened and I observed, I could read this when I started realizing I could read people. I could tell people were lying, stealing, cheating, and I observed that people who lied were always not having any fun because I had to remember the lie they told, right? So they were never in the moment, right? And to have a good time, you kind of have to be in the moment. And the people who stole, they always got caught. you know. And whatever they stole was never worth what they lost by getting caught. And people who cheated, even if they could get away with it, they were cheating themselves. So I realized that at 6, and one of these grandmas once observed me observing this, and she once, and this like really stuck to me. And she, something happened, and she asked me a question, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to rat on my friend, but I'll tell you the truth, right? This is what happened." Da, da, da. And I tried to give a clear picture of what happened. And she looked at me and she goes, "You are beyond truthful. You are sincere." I said, "What? Huh?" And she goes, "You can't tell a lie. I mean, I've known you, since you were like 2. So you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't. I watch you. You can't do any of those things. While your buddies are trying to get over and and be cool, you're just being you, you know. And that's the best thing you can be." And that really stuck to me because I just kind of did that. And if I didn't do that, and my grandma saw me not being just me, she'd kind of give me a stern talking to. And so, and I had my grandmother as my great example, where my parents, they lie, cheat, steal, I mean, in the way that everyone in America does, right? The way priests do, lawyers do, judges do. And that's our culture. That's why we live in a sociopathic culture, right? And well, my grandma never did that because she was just who she was. Right? She didn't have to impress. Uh, oh, I'm sorry you didn't meet grandma. Yeah, it's she was like I said, she brought me up, and she was the sweetest. She, even when I got older, she died at 100 when I was in Maryland. I guess I was 20 years old, maybe 19. And so she was just always her, and she was great. I mean, my favorite thing she made was eggplant parmesan. Oh, I love that. But everything else she made was great. But when she left alone, and she didn't make that stuff for herself. She would just eat a cheese sandwich, you know. But whenever I come and visit, I would come even when I got older. I would come visit her, and I would like Wednesdays was a year that I would visit her every Wednesday, and we would, and I was already working, and I had my apartment downtown, and I would go up there one day for lunch, and she would have eggplant parmesan, and then we would go to the movies, right? And I brought her to meet, my boss, Mike Sewell, Senior and Junior. And I said, "Listen, I'll work for you 7 days a week, but Wednesdays lunch. I mean, I'll work in the morning, but I'm gonna lunch for grandma, then go watch a movie, go to a movie house." And that kind of relationship, that kind of experience, that's kind of what made me. And I had a lot. See, I was very blessed. I had many, many, many people in my life who were older than me, who, when I was younger, all the way up till I was my last mentor of that age, who was older than me. Uh, was George Christie, and I was 32, and he was, 80 something. And he was in pretty good shape until he started to get sick and die. And he was a great man. And he was discovered, he Intelsat, the company that put Telstar and, satellite communication, he did that. He took, military satellites and put them up in space for the goodness of humanity. Yes, to control humans, He was part of that whole. And see, that's the hard thing is that within the hidden hand, there are a lot of good people, you know. I mean, I worked for those guys. I was part of that scene, but I never signed on, you know. A number of them try, you need to be part of the club. You need to sign in, And I said, no, no, no. And, so they played along with me, because, hey, they could use me for my skill set. And they thought at some time I would join. And, hey, AI is watching right now. And I keep telling them, hey, it's time I'm ready to sign, because you guys need me. You are adrift. You need, you don't really realize that, you deserve love's co creation. We all do, even the psychopaths. Yeah, I need sleep too. I'm just loving sharing the time with you. So I'll drop you my mailing address on the thing. So you did get my last two Gmails, right? Yep, love you too. Yep. Okay. Look at that. 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 7 seconds. I love it when that happens.